Welcome to the Founders, Futurists, and Failures podcast. I'm your host, Conor Flynn, and today our guest is Francis Stevens George. Francis is the Chief Executive Officer of Innovation Sierra Leone, a comprehensive organization that is dedicated to growing the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Sierra Leone. He is also the acting managing director of the Global Entrepreneurship Network, Sierra Leone. Founders, Futurists, and Failures is brought to you by Startup Commons and Entrepreneurial. Startup Commons is dedicated to digitizing and connecting startup ecosystems globally to scale entrepreneurship, innovation, and business creation around the world. Startup Commons provides digital connectivity and solutions to enable data-driven economic development and policymaking for local ecosystems. Entrepreneurial is working to prepare the next generation of entrepreneurial leaders for careers in startups, impact investing, and economic development. You can support this podcast by purchasing Founders, Futurists, and Failures t-shirts at entrepreneurial.com/shop. Without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Francis to learn about economic development, social entrepreneurship, and Sierra Leone's emerging innovation ecosystem. What is the Global Entrepreneurship Network and the Global Entrepreneurship Network Sierra Leone?
The Global Entrepreneurship Network is a series of programs and initiatives that is aimed at creating a global entrepreneurial ecosystem. Essentially, the globalization of entrepreneurship has meant that you find a lot of different theories and programs that are taking place across the globe. So what the Global Entrepreneurship is trying to do is to basically have a set of programs and initiatives that try to bring the best from just about every country in the world into one global ecosystem that each country can then tap into or exchange ideas with other countries. We are in 170 countries, and essentially the aim is to help everyone that would like to be an entrepreneur have what it's necessary for them to start. The Global Entrepreneurship Network Sierra Leone is essentially the Sierra Leonean affiliate of the Global Entrepreneurship Network, and they're based in Washington. And how it operates is that in each of these countries, they then have an affiliate that is given the legal authority to take some of the GEN programs and run them within their own countries based on where the needs are. So in Sierra Leone, essentially there is no ecosystem here. So our task is to now start to map the ecosystem to see what is missing so that we can begin to identify who's already on the ground, who's doing what, and thereby create the basic infrastructure to begin to build this ecosystem.
So why is the Global Entrepreneurship Network working to build an ecosystem in Sierra Leone?
We are doing that because Sierra Leone is one of the poorest countries in the world. And that's an irony because it's actually one of the mineral resource rich countries. And it also has the distinction of having the highest youth unemployment in Africa and within the developing South. So you would say places like Asia and Latin America. Sierra Leone has one of the highest rates of youth unemployment, something in the region of 75%. It is also very clear that much of the government's economic activity has been based on bringing investment into the mining sector, the mineral resources. And these are not going to create the jobs necessary to absorb a lot of the youth. So it becomes critical. In fact, it becomes actually paramount that we begin to encourage entrepreneurship, especially when you appreciate that the largest segment of the population is actually between the age of 18 and 33. So, in order for these people to be able to unleash their ideas or to give them the opportunity to create their own businesses, you need an ecosystem. Because essentially, what an ecosystem does is that it brings together the system, the processes, the people, the resources that are going to help entrepreneurs take their ideas to the startup phase and eventually, grow these companies. In the absence of an ecosystem, you're not going to be able to create the sort of entrepreneurs that are going to create jobs. What you might end up with is what we call rent seeking entrepreneurs or opportunistic entrepreneurs. That is, they don't need any ecosystem to survive or begin. They simply need a bit of box. They buy X and they sell Y and they make a commission in the middle. The entrepreneurs that are going to create jobs and grow this economy are the value creating entrepreneurs, people that actually add value to a product or service, and they need an ecosystem.
Right. So it sounds like rent seeking doesn't really drive economic development, but how do ecosystems, entrepreneurship, and innovation drive economic development?
Well, it does. To answer that question, I think we need to look at the drivers of economic development today in the 21st century as opposed to, say, in the 19th and 20th century. Today, it's very clear that the drivers of economic development are human capital, technology and innovation, and to some extent, scientific advances. No country in the world today is going to develop its economy, its people by simply, building roads, etc. We need to invest in human capital, technology, and innovation. Now, entrepreneurs are the people that are going to take these technologies. They are the people that are going to find innovations that are going to address some of the development agenda. And this means everything, for example, reducing poverty, providing clean drinking water, to treating diseases. All of these today need a technology and innovation component. If you take, for example, agriculture, in order for economic development to take place, you need to be able to feed your own people. You need an agricultural sector that is very productive. Well, today, in much of the productivity in agriculture, there is technology. You cannot increase agriculture productivity without technology. So this is why entrepreneurs are very important because they're going to be the drivers for economic development by taking opportunities that are presented through the new technologies, through digital opportunities. And of course, in doing so, they create employment. And we know that one of the drivers of development today is the disruptors, people that are disrupting traditional industries. So, for example, in order to really bring about economic development, you must um, um, alleviate poverty. And that means you have to be able to provide financial services to the very poor, the people at the bottom of the so-called pyramid. Well, without fintech or digital disruption in the financial services, you're not going to be able to reach to those people. In order to have economic development, you need to be able to provide healthcare for people. Well, many of the poor people don't have access to insurance or to the hospital. Again, with technology, you can be able to meet the healthcare needs. So it's in these ways that innovation and entrepreneurs are going to drive economic development.
Right. Your perspective on how disruptive technologies can drive economic development makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
so you're currently leading an initiative called Innovation Sierra Leone. And so what is it exactly?
Innovation Sierra is a company that I formed with partner of mine in Norway. We wrote a book together on African innovators, and then I have been running something called Innovation Africa for the past 14 years. It's essentially a huge library. But what I found was that in Norway, we have an organization that is actually a government organization whose job is basically to identify ways in which it can help startups or organizations that help startups. So I figured to create Innovation Sierra Leone, which would essentially focus on three things, and that is providing services to entrepreneurs and helping these companies to identify and develop their competitive advantages. So this is what Innovation Sierra Leone is about. Practically, we provide incubator and accelerator services. Again, going back to the ecosystem that we have just discussed, in this country, believe it or not, in 2018, there is not a single incubator or accelerator in this country. There
Wow.
is a tech hub. It's called Sensi Tech Hub. It's a co-working space, and the guy who owns it is doing fantastic, but it doesn't really have an incubation or acceleration program. So we feel that we can come in and create that. We also are bringing what I call contextual intelligence into the country. That is, trying to contextualize some of these nice theories into the local space. So essentially, this is what Innovation Sierra Leone is doing. We're pretty new, just 14 months, so it's early days yet, but already we have some very interesting young entrepreneurs we're working with in the waste to wealth space, in the fintech space, and in renewable energy. So we're very excited about the prospects.
Right. Those prospects sound very exciting.
Thank you.
So how did you get involved in Sierra Leone, and what was your inspiration for launching Innovation Sierra Leone?
Yeah, I was actually born in Sierra Leone in 1965. And then I was sent to boarding school in England, as most of the families here that yeah, want a good education for their kids. So I was sent off to school in England, and then I finished and then ended up at the LSE, took economics there, and yeah, one thing that to know that I was in Oslo. So I've basically been outside Sierra Leone for 39 years. 39 years.
Oh, wow.
And and my career has been, with the largest Norwegian company, which was into oil and gas, travel around the world. And then I left that company and joined the dot-com, craze that I just started back in 99, 2000. And I really began to see something very interesting, the internet and the opportunities it provided, etc. So I was lucky to, start to write some papers, and I got a consulting job with the World Bank to go to Ghana to basically explain to people what this new technology was about, e-commerce, etc., etc. From there, I built a reputation, and then I found myself traveling just about in every developing part of the world to basically provide services on how countries or companies can use this technology, internet technology, in order to drive their development. So imagine doing this, for 18 years. I thought, well, why can't you go and do this for your own country? At that time, there was a war in Sierra Leone, so there was no way, these things could happen. So the inspiration is essentially to come back and bring this experience I have, the failures I've had, to come and share them with people. So this is why I decided to actually come back 14 months ago. But I have to say that I can't remember, it's a long time now, when the war ended, in 2002, when the war ended in Sierra Leone, I came up with an idea that all the young people that have been fighting, that they have guns. What normally happens is that the United Nations, they give them like $100 or $200. This is what they did in Cambodia and places. You get your $200, you hand over back the gun, and you're expected to go to the village and start a business. I said, why don't we give them a computer and teach them how to code?
That's a great idea.
Yeah. So I was living on the BBC. This was a rather novel idea, but already back in 2002, I was already thinking that really technology is going to be the key. So that's why I'm here.
Yes, that's a great story, and it sounds like the perfect reason to be back.
Thank you.
And so, what advice do you have for emerging market entrepreneurs and investors?
The advice I have is based on my mistakes. I started 7 startups myself in Oslo. I've advised on several others across the world, and things change. Things don't stand the same. So today, the advice I'll have for entrepreneurs is really validate, especially in this part of the world, validate the assumptions that you have built your problem on. I'll give you an example. We have been looking at some students here. Because I run a pitch competition once every month. It's called the Freetown Pitch Night. And people come and they say the problem is there's too many plastic bottles around the country, so I'm going to start a business collecting plastic bottles and recycling them. Well, I said to them, have you validated that assumption, the assumption that there are too many plastic bottles? And usually they say, what do you mean? Well, he says, just look around you, Mr. Francis. There, I said, yeah, but yes, I can see, but is it enough for you to do a viable business? So
Right.
what I say to these entrepreneurs is always go out and validate your assumptions and try to do a very basic value map. What is the problem? What is the pain? And how is your solution going to solve it? Because, most of the time, these businesses they fail simply because somebody has not really done a proper validation, or they haven't really tested the value proposition that they're offering. To investors, my advice would be look at entrepreneurs that are disrupting an industry. I know sometimes it's a little bit, what should I say? It's a little bit risky for investors to believe that these entrepreneurs can take on, these monolithic business model, but they can, because at the end of the day, it's not the industry, it's the customer, the consumer, and if you create real value. So for an investor, look where the potential for huge disruptions are and put your money there.
Great advice. So
Thank you.
it comes down to validation for entrepreneurs and disruption for investors.
Yep. And you can't really go wrong, because there's so many opportunities there. I mean, just about everything needs to be fixed. But of course, where you're going to create value is where you've clearly identified a pain and you're going to solve that pain, and you've created a compelling, service or product that, that people are going to pay for. And there is a myth that poor people don't have money. They do have money, but they don't have a lot of it. So, but they have a lot of issues that they need to solve. So you solve them that. I mean, take for example the charging of mobile phones. You know, the penetration here is about 80% mobile phones. But of that 80%, about 67, probably 70% don't have electricity. They don't.
Wow.
So, how do you charge? How do they charge their mobile phones? You have lots of kiosks around, and they'll gladly pay. They'll gladly pay to have these mobile phones charged. So it's things like that. Water, for example. So you have various opportunities, but you really need to, because even poor people know. In fact, they know what is value much more than say the more affluent consumer.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it basically sounds like you're talking about addressing base of the pyramid problems.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, disruption, or if you go back to the question, which was a great question by the way, about how can innovation entrepreneurship lead to economic development. Um, um, if you go back to that, and what we're really talking about is how do you lift the millions of people that are below, the poverty line. And here we're talking $1 or 92 cents, in some places $1.50. How do you lift them out of that trap and bring them to a place where they start to earn a decent living? It's also about
Right.
how do you provide the services for them to become productive, productive agents. If people are sick, they're not going to be able to be very productive. Let's be honest. If they have tuberculosis, they have what are these things called when you drink bad water, the diarrheal diseases. They're not exactly. I mean, I see it here. The amount of people that have got. So all of those things that I'm talking about, disruptive entrepreneurs are creating services that are addressing those people at the bottom of the pyramid. So yes, it's about lifting them out of poverty. It's about giving them the opportunity to become active economic agents.
Yes, active economic agents. That is a perfect way to look at things. All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, Francis, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And
Okay.
best of luck with Innovation Sierra Leone.
Thank you. And it's been a pleasure. I have been reading some of your publications in Startup Commons, and they've been very inspiring to us down here. And we are, I have used the presentation, one of your slides on the startup phase, the ideation. So I think you guys are also doing a fantastic work.
Oh, thank
I
you.
think you have a very good focus, which is that we cannot just leave things to chance and say that actors would pop up in the ecosystem. We have to have intentional interventions, and I think that's one of the things that you're doing, which I really appreciate, and hope that we can use some of your tools and technologies to create something good here, because at the end of the day, that's going to help us develop our countries.
Yes, definitely. We look forward to helping you build the ecosystem in Sierra Leone.
Thank you very much, Tom.
All right. Thank you, Francis.